Good morning to our listeners. This is Senate President Wayne Niederhauser today with the Utah Legislative Update, Halloween 2013. Hope everybody's going to have a great Halloween today. With me on the show is Royce VanTassell, works for the Taxpayers Association. You know, there'll be a lot of scary things out there today, but we have some bonding questions coming up for our school districts across the state. There are many school districts that have bonds on the ballot. One of the biggest ones is in the Jordan School District, $495 million bond to build schools.
It's the biggest school district bond the state has ever seen. The Jordan School District has some substantial needs. They've been growing like gangbusters, frankly. One of the fastest growing districts in the state. We have been working with them for many months, trying to meet the needs that they have to house all of the students that that are coming into the district. But the district has refused to provide any meaningful assurances about how they're going to use the dollars in ways that will extend those dollars as far as possible. They seem intent on spending as much as possible without any regard to whether they can save costs.
So Jordan District up in southwestern quadrant of Salt Lake County, a growth area. Some of the fastest growing cities in America
absolutely
are right there in that area. They have need for schools.
They do, no question about it. But they can't really afford to continue building the same buildings they've always done. There are, if you look, for example, down in the Washington County School District, they have for several years been using what's known as tilt-up construction, where you can save 10 to 25% just on your building costs by pouring the slabs and standing them up. And as we've talked with the Jordan School Board, they've said, 10%, what does that matter? That's not a big deal. Well, I'll tell you what it matters. It means for every 10 schools you build, you get the 11th one free. And maybe it's every 4 schools and the 5th one is free. But the school district has refused to provide any meaningful assurances to taxpayers that they're going to stretch those dollars. And so the Taxpayers Association has been very aggressive in saying, you know what, we need to have the right bond at the right place. We look forward a year from now to working with the district and supporting a bond that everybody can afford. But the current bond, without any taxpayer assurances, for nearly $500 million, it's simply too much too soon.
So, Royce, you highlight a thing an issue that has been on my mind for several years as a legislator. I sat in a meeting several years ago before the school district split, the Canyons-Jordan split, and at the time, I live in Sandy, and so I was in the Jordan School District and sat in a meeting and listened to the Jordan School District talk about building schools, and they were going to need to build schools, and yes, they do. They have population growth, and it's young population, by the way, in those areas, so there's an extraordinary need. I build buildings all the time as a real estate developer and know what those cost per square foot, and I was surprised at the cost that they were quoting that it would take to build some of these schools. You talk about tilt-up, but I'm talking about steel structure, a beautiful office building costing about half of what it costs to build like a high school per square foot.
There are a lot of opportunities to save money. There is certainly no need to build a school that is a Taj Mahal. As we travel around the country, in fact, I was down in Arizona last week, and as we drove around and looked at the schools, I was frankly surprised. Their schools are frankly rather Spartan by Utah comparison, but nobody's going to look and say, you know what? Utah's students aren't scoring well, or scoring better, because they're going to these wonderful schools. We need to have good schools. They need to be well equipped, but we simply can't afford Taj Mahals.
So high schools in particular have been there's been some controversy, like up in Wasatch County, with the new Wasatch High School that was over budget by, I think, 15 million or 20 million. I can't remember the exact number. And maybe some of our listeners live up in that area. And the high school tends to be kind of a center for the community. There's the high school football on beautiful fall evenings, and so, you know, I wonder why the people aren't speaking up more, saying, "Hey, look, you know, this is our taxpayer dollars. Can't we be a little more frugal in building these buildings?" One of the arguments is that this building needs to last 100 years, and spending more money actually helps us in maintenance costs going on. Have you looked at that as a Taxpayers Association?
You know, there are bonds really across the state. For example, up in Logan, they have the longest continuously running school in the state. It started running about 1890. They're doing some refurbishing to it right now.
Is that the high school?
No, it's one of the elementary schools.
Okay.
It's one of the elementary schools.
The one I went to in Logan. Is it Wilson Elementary?
I don't remember which one. We went up and toured a couple of them over there. One was downtown. One was a little further west. So I don't know exactly where you grew up in Cache Valley, but we toured a couple of them. And the Logan bond, it's clear that they have taken sort of the long-term needs of the district into account. As we evaluated that, we could see that they do have a meaningful need. They need to upgrade some of their facilities. We decided not to take a position on that one. Whereas in the Cache School District, they clearly have, they too want to build Taj Mahals. They have a need probably for a third high school, but for some reason they feel the need to build a fourth. And it's just hard to understand why, if one new building it will suffice, why you would build a second one as a nice to have. And so there are meaningful differences and opportunities for savings. As a Taxpayers Association, we want to work with the districts to make sure that they have the buildings they need. I mean, education is the long-term driver of our state's economy. And so we need to make sure that that's done right. But we can't simply raise taxes ad infinitum and say, come hell or high water, we want the nicest schools around.
So Canyons District issued a bond just a couple of years ago and didn't raise taxes at the same time. So is this Jordan bond, is this going to be a big increase in taxes? And we're coming up to the break, so we may talk a little bit about it afterwards, but
if this bond passes, Jordan School District will vault immediately to having the highest property tax in the state. It is unprecedented in its size and scope, and that's another reason why we are so disappointed, why so many mayors are opposed to this.
So stay with us. I have Royce VanTassell with the Taxpayers Association talking about bonds and building schools and potential tax increases for you. Please stay with us. Utah Legislative Update.
Trying to find your Twitter handle.
TV's watching.
Oh yeah, you guys are still live on TV.
Oh.
2-minute break.
Well, I think we'll probably be staying on this same topic, but one thing I think we want to talk about further is just, you know, this. I look at charter schools. I look at a private school in my area, the Waterford School, beautiful building.
Sure.
But I know it doesn't cost near what it costs to build Jordan High School or Harriman High School or some of those, or the new. What is it out in Draper? What's the new high school?
The Chargers, the new Draper High School.
They're not the Cougars, they're the Chargers.
They're the Chargers. And,
okay, great.
You know, we have gone around and talked to folks that are building a lot of these charter schools. They say that the average cost per square foot for a lot of those charter schools is somewhere between $90 and $110 per square foot, whereas the schools built by a number of the districts start at $170 per square foot and can easily go to $250.
Yes, no question.
They have decided that they want the nicest facilities possible, and they just don't seem to care as much about who is paying for those dollars and what their ability is to cover all those costs.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's see. We're going to come up on being live on the air, but hopefully we've entertained our TV listeners for a few minutes in the break.
Nebo School District is watching down there.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5.
So we're back on the air. This is the Utah Legislative Update. Wayne Niederhauser, Senate President, the Utah Legislature. I have with me today Royce VanTassell of the Taxpayers Association. We've been talking about what some of you might be facing next week at the ballot box, raising your taxes to pay for schools. Sometimes there's a need for that, and there needs to be bonds passed, and sometimes even some taxes increased. There are some situations like that, right?
As a Taxpayers Association, over the last 6-7 years, we've endorsed more school district bonds than we've opposed. Schools in Utah are growing. We do need to have a place to house those schools, but we need to also to recognize and respect the needs that taxpayers have, and where districts want to make that balance and make sure that they're respecting the needs of the taxpayers and providing for the kids' education. Taxpayers Association, I'm sure the legislature wants to back them up and be supportive.
Oh, absolutely. And just to emphasize here, if you have a comment about this issue, bonds, school buildings, what you would like to see as citizens and taxpayers out there, please call in at 1-800-776-1913. We'd love to hear your comments, or if you have any questions. So one thing that I discovered, there's a charter school in Draper called American Preparatory Academy, and they tell me that they spend approximately 18% of their total budget. And these are publicly funded schools. Charter schools are publicly funded schools. They get their money from the state. And depending on where that charter school is, they might get just a little bit less than a district school. And in some rare circumstances, they might just get a little bit more, maybe like here in the Alpine District. But for the most part, they are funded less than your public schools. But they're telling me, I asked them because they had 2 teachers in a classroom. 2 teachers in a classroom. I said, where do you get the money for that? And they're saying, well, we're very frugal. We watch our dollars. They spend, they said, about 18% of their budget on infrastructure or for buildings or accommodations. But I think what happens in some of these districts is they're spending upwards around 30% and sometimes more than 30%. If they were a little more frugal with those funds, maybe this complaint that we don't have enough teachers could end somewhat.
There's no question. The charter schools make a conscious decision to allocate their dollars so that they keep smaller class sizes, so that they have a little bit more individualized instruction, whereas the district sometimes has their hands tied by union contracts. Sometimes it's simply a choice that they've made to have a bigger or nicer building, but they're getting roughly the same dollars, and how they choose to allocate that dictates the experience that student has in the classroom. Everyone can have a smaller classroom if you choose to spend your dollars that way, if that's the emphasis you want.
I just noticed, at least at this charter school, and probably not all charter schools are created equally, but the administration there, they were watching every penny and were very frugal with every one of those dollars. And we don't see that quite often in some of our other schools, especially district schools. And sometimes that's just a function of some of the size of these organizations out there. We have some pretty big school districts here in Utah. So this next Tuesday, big day for voters here in Utah, in Cache Valley, in Logan. Let's see, where else do we have bonds?
You've got a bond down in the Washington School District. This is another one that the Taxpayers Association has endorsed. They have a $185 million bond on the ballot. They have pioneered the use of tilt-up construction here in the state. Their buildings are beautiful, but they are certainly not full of nice-to-haves. They get the job done. And as we've looked at that bond, we feel very comfortable that they are watching out for the taxpayer. In fact, by one estimate they provided us, they figure they're saving about 25% over the masonry construction that, for example, the Jordan School District wants to use.
And tilt-up construction, based on what I know, is substantial construction. That's probably a 100-year building. We're talking concrete.
Yeah, it's a concrete wall that they'll then pour at the site, stand it up, and they save substantially on the cost of construction because you don't have somebody over there laying all those bricks.
So we encourage all our listeners and our citizens out there to study the issue. Don't just go out and vote for a bond, and weigh in on these issues. The more people that get involved, the better policy that is created. And there needs to be some more accountability with building school buildings in our state. I've recognized this for several years. So we encourage you to get out there and get informed about what you're voting for next week. If raising taxes for school buildings is an issue in your area. Next thing I want to talk a little bit about is transportation funding. This seems to be a big issue, and we may have some more programs on this coming up because this is going to be a big issue in the legislative session this year. I've heard a number of proposals that are going to be coming forth for us to debate. We have some unfunded liabilities, quite frankly, in the state and in our local governments, our cities and counties. Some of those budgets are stretched. What happens with the gas tax, which is completely dedicated to maintaining roads and building roads here in the state of Utah. It's a fixed amount of money per gallon. In the state, it's 24.5%. Now, you may say, well, there's more tax on gasoline than 24.5%, but
you've got some the federal gas tax of about 18.5 cents as well.
Right. So we have state and federal gas tax, and the state of Utah has not raised that tax for over 15 years. It was back in the 90s. And what happens when it's not a percentage, it doesn't increase with inflation. And so we've lost about, according to even our analysts, upwards to 40% of that value in maintaining and building roads that we had 15 years ago by not increasing the gas tax.
And I think that as we've at the Taxpayers Association have looked at it, we recognize that you need to raise the gas tax once in a while because inflation is real. As you mentioned, we've lost substantial buying power, and we need to be raising the gas tax once in a while because roads are a critical part of our economic infrastructure. If goods and services can't get from one place to the next, then the economy grinds to a halt. And in too many places, we find ourselves trying to play catch up, which means the roads have cracks, they're falling apart. And if you don't maintain those roads, the cost of maintaining those roads goes up exponentially.
So I read a study recently about the best and worst roads in America, and Utah was among some of the best in the roads, the maintenance of the roads. Some roads in the south and even California have not been maintained very well over the years. Congestion, horrible congestion. I sometimes are very frustrated here in my community in Salt Lake County with congestion, but all you need to do is go to California or even Seattle for a week, and you realize that we have no congestion compared to what some of those other cities face. So we've done pretty well, and I think that's a lot that's associated with, even though we haven't raised the income tax, we've used a lot of general funds to supplement the gas tax.
Right now, we're spending about $400 million a year out of the general fund to supplement our transportation funding. And the real problem with that is that, when I, for example, go out and buy a new pair of bindings for my skis, that's not going to change how much I drive, because I don't recognize a cost. Or the cost that I'm paying in sales tax doesn't have anything to do with how I'm using those roads. Whereas if I'm driving more and paying more gas tax, I look and say, oh, wait, maybe I need to maybe I can't afford that, or maybe it's okay with me. But there's a very close connection between how far I drive and how much I'm paying for that road. But when we take the dollars that come out of property tax or sales tax and spend them on the roads, we sever that connection, and people don't recognize that how much they drive has a significant impact on the condition of the roads that they're driving on, maintaining those roads.
Absolutely. I think that we've actually had this debate over water, for example, which is funded by property tax and by user fees. And there's arguments out there that we shouldn't fund a lot of it with property tax, so that the users of water in an arid state,
second driest state in the country,
realize just how much it costs to provide that water if it's more of a user fee rather than having property tax. The same concept. Correct?
Absolutely the same concept. If we paid for food based on how many baseballs we bought, nobody would have any connection. You'd have no idea whether you needed to buy more baseballs because you don't know what the connection is between baseballs and food. When we, though, have the tax intimately connected with what the way we use it, then we say, oh, wait, maybe I need to eat more food. Maybe I need to eat less food. Maybe but it's an intimate connection. And unfortunately, what we've got right now is falling apart. And while our roads in many places are good, if we don't maintain them, then the condition will degrade very quickly, and we'll find ourselves having to pay far more than if we made the upfront investment.
Absolutely. And so there's going to be some significant discussion, folks, those who are listening out there, regarding funds for roads in the legislature this year. There may be a gas tax increase. There hasn't been one for 15 years. Where our roads are in dire need of funds, and we're a growth state, so we need to be building roads. There's also your local roads that need some funding. So I'm sure we'll have some more discussion on this as we get closer to the legislative session and some more proposals. Please stay with us, and joining us in the next segment is Senator Howard Stevenson, also of the Taxpayers Association, and also serving in the legislature. We'll be talking about digital learning. So stay with us, Utah Legislative Update. So there's a couple of proposals out there. One of the proposals for an increase in gas tax, and mind you, those who are watching us on TV, that gas tax is the second most hated tax. Someone might think that it's income tax. The first being
property tax.
Everyone
tax. Knows exactly how much they pay, and they know how much they hate it.
And you pay it once a year in November, and it's a significant tax. And so property tax is the most hated tax, and gas tax is the second most hated tax. And so what we have is it being it's politically challenged anytime someone wants to propose a gas tax increase.
Utah taxpayers.
Senator, how are you?
This is Howard.
Hi, Howard.
You're on TV
We'll
now.
call you Senator Stevenson.
I thought Royce was going to be on the first half.
He has been.
Oh, I've been listening to Sutherland.
Tell them that our equipment is down on the Celestial Radio, and we'll rebroadcast it today at 3.
So we're going to be rebroadcast today at 3. Apparently,
I guess we're not live.
Oh, this is a recording then. Okay.
And we're live on TV, though.
So we've been talking about transportation funding, Senator, and some of the proposals out there, increases in gas tax. One of them is that I've heard of recently is a 10-cent, a 3% local option on gas tax, which initially is a 10-cent increase.
And I think the real problem with that proposal, the one that sticks most in the Taxpayers Association's craw, is that local option portion. Right now, we collect the gas tax at the retail level. If you they collect it, then they take it out to the retailer. And if different retailers are paying or not paying gas tax, depending on which jurisdictions have opted in, it gets really, really difficult to administer. And we have a lot of concerns with that idea of a local option gas tax.
Also,
Unless it's uniform.
Right. If
Right.
it's uniform, if everybody adopts it, then I think that you have a very different conversation.
then you don't have gas stations on the borders of counties.
Right.
Because one county costs more than the other county.
You've got a Chevron
Right.
there on the border of Salt Lake and Utah County, and a Maverick on the other side, and people will quickly decide where to go.
Absolutely.